What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Pick Six Podcast, CBS Sports Daily NFL Podcast. I'm Will Brinson. I'm your host. It is Thursday, March 25th. Reminder, tomorrow on the podcast, we'll have a mailbag episode in which you can submit any questions you like via a 5-star Apple review. Do that on Apple Podcasts. We will answer any question you have about free agency, any player, any team, anything about the NFL or anything about life in general. In the feed, you can check out the Best Bargain Free Agent podcast with Jared Dubin, a great talk about some excellent some excellent free agent signings that occurred, and much more. By the way, on the surface, it could have been a tough year for Jameis Winston. He had to watch Taysom Hill replace Drew Brees and also had to watch his former team win the Super Bowl with a quarterback who replaced him. Ouch. On this week's episode of All Things Covered, Winston shares his emotions of 2020, how he's preparing for a quarterback competition in 2021, the best wide receiver in the NFC South, and much more. Go check out his chat with B-Mac and follow the All Things Covered podcast wherever you find this one. Let's get into some free agency takeaways with our good pal and freshly minted Mina Kimes with Lenny podcast guest, I guess would be the word. Jonathan Jones. What's up, JJ?
What's up, man? Yeah, it was a fun podcast. Would encourage everyone as much as we can. Tell people, hey, go over there and listen to that podcast, but come back here and listen to this one.
Yeah, I mean, like I think it's good pub to go to, like, if you're on the Lenny podcast.
That's right. It was dope.
Is it the Lenny podcast? I can't remember what Mina's podcast is called.
I think it's the Mina Kimes podcast with Lenny, maybe, perhaps.
Yeah. How do you feel about a dog having a podcast? Maybe we may have jumped the shark when a dog has a podcast.
Well, it's 2021 and, you just got to keep innovating.
Although it's possible that the dog is better at podcasting than me. What stands out? It's probably likely, actually. What stands out to you in free agency, JJ? Give me would you rather be, who had a better free agency, the Buccaneers or the Patriots?
No, I was actually just texting with a source about the Bucs. And the idea was, how much credit do you give Jason Light? And how much of this is, hey, it's Tom Brady and it's the economic realities of the NFL, where you have veterans who, Ndamukong Suh, for example, we've known him to forever be a mercenary in his career, right?
He is his best bud is Warren Buffett. He's a mercenary,
and that's okay, and that's fine. But in another year, would Ndamukong Suh have gotten $12 million instead of 9 plus incentives and gone to where he got 12 or 13 if he hadn't won a Super Bowl the year before, and if a team actually could pay him upwards of $10 million, would he have done it? But instead, he had the Super Bowl. So I'll read it verbatim. Light also had kept the band together thanks to Jackie Davidson and Mike Greenberg in the front office over there handling the cap. It's really hard to keep a Super Bowl team together, and as a group, they're making it work. I think it helps having a few vets over 30 who have already made a ton of money and aren't necessarily looking for real 4 to 5 year deals with $30 to $50 million in guaranteed money. And so that's not to say, hey, Jason Light has an easy job because he has Tom Brady, but there was a confluence of factors involved with this, with the type of, Levante David were 26 and not however old he is, closer to 30. It was going to be a whole lot harder to keep him, but instead he signs that 2-year, $25 million deal. So there's credit to Jason Light. There's his front office staff. There's Tom Brady. There's an interesting collection of guys at this point in their careers.
Yeah. I mean, I think I agree completely. Like that's why I was saying leading up to it is why Chris Godwin is the guy that you tag, because he is an in your prime wide receiver who, when we see what Kenny Golladay got from a desperate Dave Gettleman, Chris Godwin would have gotten that or more in the market. He's younger, he's on a Super Bowl winning team, I guess, if that matters technically. And, he's certainly a prolific player at that position. Whereas Shaq Barrett and Levante David, to me, they make so much sense in Todd Bowles' defense in the economic reality that you're pointing out, that with the chance to come back and run back a Super Bowl champion, why would you not figure out a way to make it work? It's not like you're taking no money. You're just taking like you're taking less money, and that's just how everyone is having to deal with it. It's we talked about this leading up to free agency. There was always going to be a bunch of shorter deals.
Yep.
For these for these players and less money. That's the reality of a salary cap dropping. So you tag Godwin, and then you're able to bring these guys back and run it back. I would actually posit though that I think the Patriots had a better free agency, if only because I think that they have a chance to be good in 2021. Am I crazy?
No, I mean, it's obviously subjective. I think that the Patriots had a good free agency. I would say the better free agency is a Super Bowl winning team that kept their all 22 starters together for next season. I think that that's an incredible free agency and really is never done. I was not surprised by the Patriots spending money. That's what the money's for. In big extreme Don Draper voice, like you lost. And you have money. You lost last year. You have the money this year. You have obvious holes. You've drafted like crap. So yeah, of course, this is what you do. Now, do you pay all that guaranteed money to the tight ends? I don't know. Do you give Nelson Aguilar 2 years, 22? I don't know. But if all this stuff is just 2-year deals, ultimately, which is what the Bucs stuff is as well, because Tom Brady, 2 more years, all this stuff. If all we're talking about is ultimately 2-year deals, and it gets you back to the playoffs, and you can challenge the Bills for the AFC East again, it doesn't really matter.
No. And I think maybe Hunter Henry's is a little bit like halfway in between, but it feels like the only real deal was Jonnu Smith.
That was a good deal.
And I like Jonnu Smith is awesome. I am hashtag team Jonnu, and Jonnu in all caps, like Dave Richard likes to do. I mean, it's like Jonnu Smith will run it out of the backfield. He's great on tight end screens. He's an above average blocker. He's everything you want in a tight end. And that's what the Patriots offense has sorely missed ever since Gronk departed for whatever he was doing in retirement. And all these other deals, like, the Nelson Aguilar contract is a lot for Nelson Aguilar, but I guess he's technically a deep threat now. Either way, you're not submarining your cap down the road, and that's what's important. You're giving yourself a chance to win now, which is, by the way, what Belichick has to do. Like he has to make the playoffs this year for his own peace of mind and for people who are going to jump on him from the perspective of, Tom Brady's still really good, and you haven't made, like if he misses the playoffs twice and Tom Brady wins 2 Super Bowls, that there's going to be a talk.
Yeah, that's a difficult legacy talk, and we know that Bill Belichick is probably the best historian of the game that's anywhere in the game of football right now. With due respect to Gil Brandt, I thought that the best deal for me for the Patriots was Kyle Benoit at 2 years, $12 million. That was a surprise cut, and the compensatory pick they got when he left in free agency. That's exactly right. So Kyle Benoit ultimately got $15 million for 1 year in Miami. We know that Brian Flores, I have a buddy who he's now in a long-term relationship, but for a while he was just kind of like serial dating. And after 3 months, he just looked at the girl and was like, listen, it's not working out. And she'd be like, well, what happened? He's like, it's just not working out. And Brian Flores seems like that guy where he's just like, he's done. That's it.
Yeah.
He's done it. He's done it with his coordinators. He's done it with PR staff members. He's doing it with Kyle Van Noy. He's done it with his quarterbacks. Obviously,
he did it with Tua in the middle of a football game last year. He's like
multiple times.
He's like on a date. He's like, this isn't working out. She's like, whoa, we haven't even gotten the entree yet. What are you doing? He's like, this isn't working out. I'm out of here, and just stormed out of the restaurant.
So Kyle Van Noy wasn't a bad player last year. He got a great deal. Again, $15 million at his age 29 season. So now he gets a 2-year, $12 million deal with the Pats. I thought that was probably a really solid, probably their best value signing.
Okay. I dig it. And I think New England will be good again. A lot may depend on how good the division is, honestly. The Bills are maybe the steadiest team in football right now, which is wild to think about. If you imagine going back to 2019 or 2015, if you want, whatever, yeah,
16 before they went to the playoffs with Tyrod.
Yeah, and being like, who's going to be a really maybe the most consistent winner, like the team you trust the most in football, the Buffalo Bills in 2021. You'd be like, oh, that sounds, yeah, sure, that sounds totally normal in 2015. What weird could happen between now and 2021 that makes the Bills so good and consistent? Right.
No, I thought Brandon Beane and his group there had a really good free agency. We're not going to talk about him like the Patriots. We're not going to talk about him like the Bucs. But going back to the Trey White contract, that was a mistake by Trey White's agent to do that deal before Jalen Ramsey got paid. That was a good contract from the moment it was signed for the Bills.
Yep.
Matt Milano took less to stay there. They got John Feliciano back. Who else up there? They made a run at Gronk. They lost John Brown. They got Emmanuel Sanders. I really like the deals that the Buffalo Bills put together. A lot of team-friendly deals for them.
Yeah. People want to play in Buffalo, which is not something, again, I thought I'd say in 2015. The New York Giants, you know Dave Gettleman pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Were you I guess you were on the Observer. Were you at the Observer when Gettleman was there, or was it?
Covered him his entire tenure in Carolina, from hire to unceremonious fire.
So I feel like, I don't know Dave Gettleman well. Don't know Dave Gettleman at all, really. But I do feel like I know what Dave Gettleman is going to do. And I don't know if that's because I feel like when it comes to Dave Gettleman, people try to outthink themselves. Dave Gettleman is very simple to understand. If you figure out what he likes and you figure out how you can easily identify what his approach is going to be when it comes to team building. And I feel like this has been true for years. Like I said, leading up, we were sitting in the draft in Nashville, and I was like, listen, Dave Gettleman is taking Dexter Lawrence. Okay. I don't care I don't care how he's going to do it. One of those first round picks is going to be Dexter Lawrence. He will not let that guy is a Dave Gettleman archetype of a player. And I also felt like he was clearly going to draft or sign a wide receiver and spend big money on it because he needs to prop up Daniel Jones. Leonard Williams is getting a huge contract. I feel like it's very obvious that Saquon Barkley is getting a huge contract this offseason. Do you think in totality?
I don't know about Saquon now.
Oh,
about that ACL. We'll see. We'll see what the economic realities and what this year is going to look like, whatever the cap may be next year. I don't think it's a done deal that after year 3 with the running back like we had seen with a McCaffrey and a Zeke Elliott, that's definitely going to happen. Before the injury, I would have said, hey, he gets anywhere close to 1,000 rushing yards, it's definitely going to happen. I'm not sure right now.
Is that a Giants thing or a Saquon thing?
It could be both. I mean, obviously the Giants want to protect themselves, and Saquon's going to want some major upfront money that, if the cap's down next year as well, there are realities to that, that the Giants may not want to kick the can down the road a whole bunch, because Dave Gettleman hasn't done that a lot. He did it a little bit this year, but that doesn't mean that he's comfortable with it. So we'll see. As far as the Giants, though, Gettleman.
Actually, I'm gonna agree with you very quickly, just because they have $9 million in cap space, according to Spotrac, excuse me, and it is. I could see Dave Gettleman sitting Saquon down and be like, Saquon, listen, you're gonna have a great year, and then we're gonna extend you. I guarantee you, I promise you, you're the face of the franchise. Trust me, you're gonna get paid. And they're giving him the money next year, if only because if you see how the Kenny Golladay contract is structured. There's a $4 million cap hit this year. That's the reality of the situation. So yes, I'll agree with you there. But do you buy that they could be contenders this year with what they have done in free agency?
Yeah, I liked your Dave Gettleman, Alec Baldwin voice there.
Yeah, it was like a Pacino, Baldwin, raspy homeless guy thing. Yeah,
they could. I still like Washington if Fitzpatrick doesn't have a bad day on a bad day.
Same.
Still not sure about this Dallas defense. And so, you have a Giants team that there are no more excuses. Gettleman could not figure out that other cornerback position. And so he had to overpay and go get a Dory Jackson. He wasn't able to get Josh Allen in the draft when he wanted Daniel Jones. And so he had to go trade for and then overpay Leonard Williams. And, you sign Odell Beckham, things don't work out. You need a guy who's going to be that guy out there. You overpay for Kenny Golladay. I think that we all understand that he didn't have to pay as much as he did for 2 of those players, but he still did. For me, it comes down to Jason Garrett with this offense. I think that Daniel Jones, as the year progressed, did a better job of taking care of the football, of valuing the football. And now I need to see this Giants offense come into, frankly, the 21st century. not 2021, but like I'm just talking about just some basic pre-snap motion. And so if we can get that from Jason Garrett and have a less vanilla playbook for Daniel Jones and weapons, if John Ross can, revitalize his career and add that speed while catching the ball and holding on to it, if Kyle Rudolph and his foot turn out okay, that's a more reliable target than Evan Ingram. So yeah, I like what he's done along the offensive line as well. So you start adding up those things, you're running out of excuses for both Dave Gettleman and Daniel Jones at that point.
It's okay to admit that because they have a Duke and NC State quarterback on the roster, that's why you hate the Giants, JJ. It's okay to admit that.
Okay, thank you. I have no disdain for.
I actually hadn't thought of that until just right now, but maybe they could sign. I guess they can't sign Mitchell Trubisky until next offseason. But then they would have a real Tobacco Road flavor.
That was another great deal for the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, it really was. Yeah. Okay, coming up, quarterback movement. Not as much as we thought. TV deals went down. What does that mean for the long-term future and short-term future of the NFL? Next. All right, so the quarterback movement in terms of what we saw this year, go after Matthew Stafford got traded, because this happened to me like 10 times on radio. People were like, "Oh, do you think we're going to see not as much quarterback movement? Like maybe this could be disappointing based on what people have been saying." And I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely. Like if Deshaun Watson doesn't get traded, there's a bunch of dominoes that won't fall." If you had to give the quarterback movement that we've seen so far a rating on the excitement scale, 1 to 10, what would you give it?
Oh man, it's at a 2.5.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we were anticipating a Marcus Mariota trade, but he didn't want to sign an extension with anyone, so then that kind of killed his trade market. If the Raiders were ever going to trade him, we knew that Fitz was going to go out and get something $10 million. Okay. There was no Ryan Tannehill $100 million contract this offseason, right? Cam signs his deal and Jameis. And so, yeah, I think everyone was waiting for the Deshaun deal to ultimately happen. It became pretty clear in February that Houston wasn't going to do anything before the start of free agency. And so now you're talking about, all right, well, what do the Jets do with Sam Darnold? Well, they don't have to do anything with Sam Darnold right now. I think they ultimately will trade him and draft Zach Wilson, second overall, but they don't have to do anything with him right now. I saw the Corey Davis. Yeah, I was brought on and I was told that Sam Darnold was going to be the quarterback in 2021. I mean,
you get like presumably Corey Davis showed up and was like, his agent's like, so who's going to be the quarterback? They're like,
Sam Darnold's our quarterback right now.
Are you a Trojan horse? What do you mean? We're trying to give you millions of dollars. Why are you asking us who the quarterback is?
I'm not. I would not take that to the bank.
Right.
To mean that he's starting week 1 for them. So, you still look. Denver wanted to be a player for Deshaun Watson. I cannot imagine that the Broncos are going to comfortably go into the season with Drew Lock as their week 1 starter. So I'm excited to see what sort of movement happens at the top of the draft. You have a desperate Carolina team. If they can't or don't want to get their hands on a Deshaun Watson, then who do they trade with? And really the only team that you can see them trading with is Miami at 3. And can they offer the best package there at 3? Because they're not going to trade at 4 with the Atlanta Falcons.
You wouldn't think so.
Well, there's no way the Falcons could possibly do that. The Falcons couldn't trade out of 4 and say, you know what, we're okay with Matt Ryan for now in the next couple of years. Panthers, you move up to 4 and take Justin Fields, a guy that we could have gotten at 4. And if he dominates for 15 years, I mean, that's a career ender for like Terry Fontenot before his career really started.
It's like 1 foot out the gate and just sideswiped by a Mack truck.
Can't do it.
Like you're stepping out of your house and all of a sudden a 18-wheeler comes driving through your front yard and cleans your clock. That's what trading. But I actually think there's like a good case to be made that teams should trade more in the division like that. Only if you're the Falcons, you're like, all right, we don't think Fields is that good, and we can get a future first from Carolina. And I don't get me wrong, I don't think teams don't have the appetite for that. So it won't happen. I am curious. You mentioned Carolina trading up or trading for Watson. I think if I'm in the Carolina front office, I'm a little concerned that David Tepper has smelled blood in the water when it comes to a quarterback. And now all of a sudden the market, it, I know it. Everybody knows it. David Tepper wants Deshaun Watson. And
wanted.
Yes.
We don't know that he still does with everything that's happened.
Right. Well, when I say that, I mean I think David Tepper saw Matthew Stafford get traded, Carson Wentz get traded, Jared Goff get traded, and realizes that this is an unprecedented time for quarterback acquisition, and as such believes that his team should accelerate its rebuilding process and go get a young franchise quarterback. And the idea of getting Deshaun Watson, now, of course, all the off-field stuff is problematic. I would posit that in a total vacuum that David Tepper would be fine, would still want Deshaun Watson. I don't know if the moral or PR angle, however you want to couch it, would allow him to do that now. But I do think he's still interested. I think the problem is that if you're Carolina, he's now made it very clear he wanted Deshaun Watson at least.
Yes.
Which means he is chasing a quarterback, and you wonder, will there be throwing some good money after bad on the hopes of getting Watson in the draft because you've already accelerated your mental process on how you want to approach this?
I'm fascinated. I don't think that Mac Jones is going to be a guy for the Carolina Panthers.
Why does Ryan keep doing this? Ryan Wilson what are we doing?
I don't think Mac Jones is going to be there. Is going to be the Panthers.
I think he'll be there. I think he'll be available.
That's right. Right. You know, I think that David Tepper made a mistake again by not veiling his thoughts on Teddy Bridgewater. When he fired Marty Hurney and he got on the call with reporters and didn't really avoid the opportunity to let folks know that Teddy Bridgewater had played so poorly at end of half situations, last 4-minute situations, that he had no taste for it. And so that didn't help Teddy Bridgewater's trade value and market. And it didn't make Teddy Bridgewater feel good. And now you're in a position where the guy that you were thinking to make a run at, maybe you can't make a run at him anymore. And so who comes into focus if you can't get up there and get a Fields or Zach Wilson? It's Trey Lance. Well, the only way that you're going to get a Trey Lance is if you still stick with Teddy Bridgewater in 2021. And Teddy Bridgewater doesn't feel great about how you talked about him a couple months ago.
It probably doesn't feel great about being benched midseason for PJ Walker either, which is not ideal. So I think the Carolina Panthers, it felt like for a hot minute that they were in the driver's seat for Deshaun Watson, that they were going to flip everything around. And now all of a sudden things have dramatically shifted for them. And there are certainly questions to be asked. So I'm trying to think, any other, is it all on Deshaun at this point for the dominoes? I mean, Sam Darnold, obviously, I guess could be a separate domino, but I think
it's a draft. I think who's going to make the move to slide up there? Is it going to be the Patriots, where they pick in 15? Are they going to make that move? Because I think it's going to be one of two things. Either we're going to see people waiting, hoping for the Deshaun domino, or we're going to see a team say, you know what, this ain't going to get figured out by the end of April when everybody's meeting up in Cleveland, and we need to go ahead and make our move right now. Similar to 2016 with the Rams and the Eagles making their move in the spring, well before the draft started, with the Browns and the Titans. And so I think that whenever one of those things happens, that will then answer the question for us.
I'm not an actual lawyer. I know some people may listen to the show and think, oh, wow, Brinson's a lawyer in his free time. I'm not. I'm just a formerly certified paralegal. I will tell you this, though. Is
that true?
I used to be a paralegal, yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that.
For my dad. Thanks, Dad. I actually had to go take the test at a community college and everything. So it's March 25th when people are listening to this podcast.
Yeah.
There have been, in the past 4 days, I don't know, like 42, 43 lawsuits filed against Deshaun Watson. I'm just kidding. It's like he's up to like 15 or 16.
It's at 16 as we are recording right now.
One of the things that happens in civil lawsuits and in criminal cases is that when you are almost certainly every single time, as whether you're the plaintiff when you're the defendant and you're the defendant's lawyer, you file a motion for extension of time to get an extra 30 days to respond to a civil lawsuit in the court, which means that you are probably going to have 60 days from the time that said civil lawsuit was filed before you actually reply to it in the form of a full legal response. Now, there could be a settlement before then, of course, but if the normal civil law legal proceedings are to take place, you're talking 60 days out from the day that the lawsuit was filed, which means that there will probably be no solution for this by the time that the draft shows up. And I think NFL teams need to acquaint themselves with the legal proceedings, because Deshaun Watson ain't moving before the draft unless these are all just wildly false claims and he has proof against them, or if he settles these lawsuits, at which point there are going to be questions asked. So to me, there's no chance he gets traded before the draft based on everything that's happened in the last week. And that means that teams have to make separate plans, whether it's Sam Darnold, Jimmy Garoppolo, whatever you think you're going to do in the draft. That all has changed dramatically in the last 7 days.
Yeah, the math on it. I'll tell you this, Will. I heard from one team over the weekend that was strongly considering hiring a private investigator in Houston to investigate the claims. So we're obviously going to see how that plays out. The timeline that you just laid out, I think, is a pretty normal and natural one, that neither one of us is making any sort of determination on culpability, guilt, or innocence or anything, but just very simply that the 60 days takes place after April the 29th or 30th, and his value would then seemingly decrease, at least from a Houston Texans perspective, and then they really have to decide, what's it going to be. So I do agree with you that this has put, in just the football sense, has put any sort of trade discussion on ice, no doubt.
Yeah, and look, the reality is, if the Texans are trading him, let's say that, and if assuming that he plays 16 games in 2021, whoever gets him is going to get a huge benefit from like their team is going to be better. So the picks that, like, if you're the Texans, you want, it is a bird in the hand situation. You need to get the draft picks this year to get a replacement quarterback, and B, because the picks are going to be better than the ones that the team that you give Deshaun Watson to, in theory, will be in 2022. So it is a very, very narrow tightrope, as all tightropes really are. All right, television deals, huge deals signed. Of course, as CBS employees, we're thrilled to have this. But look, we look at the NFL for the next 10 years.
Very happy. Well, shout out CBS.
Right. I mean, if we're all right. So just give me a quick power ranking of which network did the best in the television. I'm just kidding.
CBS.
What do you think, for short-term and long-term purposes, what do these TV deals mean? And I think one thing worth including here, JJ, is because I've had people ask me, they're like, "Oh, isn't the cap going to shoot up?" It's like, no. That's not really how they don't want the cap flying all up and down all over the place.
No, and frankly, to the second point last, remember a couple years ago when the NBA had that gigantic spike in the salary cap and everybody got paid, and then folks were looking around a couple of years later like, "Whew, boy, that was a mistake that we paid that guy, the $98 million contract." The NFL saw that. And the team owners saw that, and they don't want that to happen here. So there's not going to be a gigantic spike next year. Not only that, it's not going to happen when these deals take place in 2023, because they run from 2023 to 33. This is going to be incremental. The NFL is very happy with the way the cap has gone up until this past season. They want to keep that. Obviously there was a lot of flexibility built into the deals as it relates to streaming. Linear TV is still the behemoth. That's what the NFL very clearly stated with these deals. Amazon's going to be interesting. I'm excited to see how they produce the show, because they've been borrowing, I think, Fox to when Amazon has hosted these shows, they've been borrowing from Fox on that. So I'm interested to see how that goes. And then there's obviously the gambling aspect. And Will, I've written about this for years, dating back to my time at Sports Illustrated, wrote about it during the season. Everyone thinks that everybody's getting rich off of sports gambling. And the fact is that while
I can attest that that's not always true. I promise you it's not always true.
It is a multi-billion-dollar industry, sports gaming is. There's no question about it. But when you start figuring out how many pieces of the pie there are to actually eat, there aren't that many. And so, yeah, the NFL can sell its data rights to certain sports books, but after that, it's not going to be some gigantic deal, but they still built in the flexibility there. So that's what was interesting to me was the flexibility of, hey, where we're heading in terms of how we digest television and what we don't know will be happening 7 to 10 years from now.
And again, on the salary cap point, I don't think it can be stressed enough that the NFLPA and the NFL do not want to go 220, 185 or 182, 230, 155. Like they don't want it to be this jagged, like Dow Jones, style move. Like they don't want the salary cap to be GameStop. Okay. They want it to be a flat growth. This is going to be, they want the COVID season. And by the way, kudos to you, JJ, for calling this at the outset, because we talked about this a year ago and how this is going to be, roughly a year ago, how this is going to be altered. But they want this to be an aberration, a dip where it's it dips and then it slowly builds back up.
Work your way back.
And then it's graded out, and they want it to be a smooth, even slope, and they'll just get back to where they were. And does it sort of benefit the NFL owners over the long haul? Probably, but that's what most of these things do, unfortunately. Like it turns out these billionaires are pretty good at writing the rules and changing the rules midstream. I'm not saying that they're fixing this. It's just but the NFLPA doesn't want this either. They don't want some spike back up and then you have to overcorrect for it. Like
certain players entering a contract year at 29 years old would love for it to spike.
Sure.
It would only benefit a very, very small percentage of NFL players. So yes, I think that you illustrated it perfectly well.
All right. Anything else from free agency? I can't believe I wore a Carolina blue t-shirt for this podcast.
I love that.
I like that Jackie t-shirt you got there.
I appreciate that, man. Yeah, I think look for Jadeveon Clowney. I think that he might find a landing spot soon. Really an enigma of a guy who, no sacks last year. Can't trust him in terms of his health. Still has a team source told me, he has an inflated sense of what his number is, and we and the rest of the league don't believe it. So, obviously it's going to be a lot like these quarterback contracts, I think, that we've seen, the backup quarterback contracts, where there's going to be a $6 or $7 million base and then incentives built into sacks and whatnot. But he might ink a deal this week.
Clowney is rather unfortunately, because look, he's especially if you're like from around here, like, or if you're around North Carolina, like you've watched Clowney, for a long time. It feels like the Michigan hit is going to be the highlight.
Yeah, it
sucks because I think he's a underrated player relative to
his production and stats.
Yeah, but he's overrated based on the name value, probably because of the Michigan hit.
Yeah, that's probably why. It's a weird thing. A guy who senior year high school probably could have played in the NFL.
Yeah.
Not number one overall pick, but could have been on an NFL roster.
An absolute freak show of a dude.
Yeah, and there's not many people that you say that about, right? It's like Adrian Peterson, and then the next one after that is Jadeveon Clowney, and then there's nobody after that.
Mitchell Trubisky in between.
Go Heels.
Go Heels. All right, JJ. Always a pleasure, buddy.
Appreciate it, man.